Snow hammered down on the tiny port town of Seldovia, the kind that buried trucks overnight and made the harbor groan under sheets of ice. The wind howled outside our cedar-paneled house, but inside, laughter from my husband's poker table rattled the thin walls. I stood in the kitchen, tray of smoked salmon trembling in my hands. "She's basically a free crew member," my husband, Silas North, said loud enough for every card player to hear. "An unpaid deckhand. If she wasn't useful, I would have tossed her overboard years ago." The men roared, their beer glasses clinking like bells. 5 years I'd given up my workshop, my friends, my craft as a luthier. 5 years of fetching, carrying, cooking, cleaning, watching over him after the so-called diving accident. I thought I was living out the vows, in sickness and in health. But to him, I was just free labor, disposable. I set the tray down, turned toward the hallway, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a wife. I felt invisible, like a ghost keeping someone else alive. And in that moment, one thought cut through me like the wind outside. If I'm his free crew, then maybe it's time I steer this ship out of his harbor. 5 years earlier, Silas had come home from a salvage dive with a story that split our lives in two. He claimed a snapped tether line had nearly drowned him, leaving his legs too weak for steady work and his lungs too fragile for heavy lifting. The doctors said otherwise: limited damage, plenty of potential for recovery with discipline and therapy. But Silas knew how to twist words until they bent in his favor. At first, I believed him. I shut down my workshop, stopped taking commissions for handcrafted violins, and told myself it was temporary, just until he got back on his feet. But temporary stretched into years. I became his driver, his cook, his secretary, his nurse, and his excuse. "You know I can't haul the firewood," he'd say, stretching out in his recliner while I staggered in with an armful of frozen logs. "You know the pain flares when I use the stairs," he'd remind me as I hauled his gear from the basement to the deck. "You know I can't face the bank alone," he'd insist, as we sat down together to review every dollar I spent, though he never seemed too weak to order premium whiskey for poker nights. Bit by bit, he carved me away from the people I loved. He told my children, June and Theo, that I was smothering him, exaggerating his condition to keep him dependent. They started to doubt me to pull back. When they visited, they'd scold me gently. "Mom, maybe you should let Dad handle more himself. He doesn't look that bad." Friends stopped calling. I turned down invitations. Soon it was just me, Silas, and his endless list of what I had to do. And the cruelest part, I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was overprotective. Maybe I didn't understand chronic pain. Maybe I was selfish for wishing he'd just try harder. Until the night I stood behind that cedar wall, tray shaking in my hands, and heard the words that cracked the illusion wide open. Free crew. That was the moment the seed of rebellion planted itself in me. I didn't know it yet, but everything Silas built on lies was about to start collapsing. The first slip came from something Silas couldn't manipulate: technology. He wore an exosuit brace, a kind of powered frame that supported his legs when he walked. Every movement logged to an app I managed for him: mileage, steps, stress levels. Normally, I didn't question it. But one evening, as I synced the data, I noticed something strange. The suit showed he'd walked nearly half a mile around midnight. Except, I'd been asleep in the bedroom, and he was supposedly resting on the couch. I told myself it must have been a glitch, but then it happened again the following week, long stretches of steady walking when I wasn't with him. If Silas was as crippled as he claimed, how was he clocking laps in the dark? The second crack came courtesy of the harbor. In 2042, every dock in Seldovia had AI surveillance cameras, part safety measure, part insurance requirement. My friend, Deputy Harbor Master Red Alvarez, sometimes let me peek at archived feeds when storms knocked out power at home. One night, Curiosity got the better of me. I asked him casually to pull a few clips from the week before. What I saw made my stomach drop. There was Silas, my husband who claimed he couldn't lift more than 10 pounds, hauling a bait crate the size of a child off a supply boat. No limp, no hesitation, no wheezing for air. He moved with the ease of the man I married, not the invalid he pretended to be. The worst part? He didn't look sick. He looked alive, almost happy. Like living the lie in front of me wasn't enough. He needed the thrill of sneaking behind my back, proving to himself that he was still in control. That night, as the wind howled across the bay, I sat at the kitchen table replaying the footage until dawn. My hands shook, but not from the cold. For the first time in 5 years, I knew something with certainty. Silas wasn't broken. He was lying. And if he could lie about his body, what else had he been hiding from me? Once I saw him carry that crate on the harbor feed, the floodgates opened in my mind. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't pretend anymore. So, I did what I'd never dared before. I went hunting. Silas had always kept a tight grip on our finances. He insisted on handling the online banking, claiming numbers confused me. Convenient for a man who couldn't walk to the mailbox but could memorize every transaction down to the penny. That night, while he snored in his recliner, I opened his old tablet. The password was easy, our anniversary. Almost too easy, as if he never thought I'd look. The first thing I found was a string of encrypted folders, but Silas wasn't as clever as he believed. The files weren't hidden, they were just renamed. One-read phishing licenses. Inside, I discovered account transfers, steady, deliberate, all under the threshold that would trigger alerts. The money was being funneled into something called the Silent Wave Fund. I'd never heard of it. Digging deeper, I saw emails between Silas and a woman named Maeve Quinn. She wasn't just a friend. She was listed as the fund's treasurer. The messages were casual, almost intimate talk of keeping the donations clean, of another dinner in Seattle, and don't let Aurelia get suspicious. My breath caught. Donations, dinners, suspicion. Scrolling through credit card statements I hadn't known existed, I saw the truth unfold. Lavish meals at upscale restaurants during the hours I was running errands. Hotel bookings under his name. Jewelry invoices, and recurring payments to dating sites I didn't even know still existed in 2042. Every line on those statements was a slap across my face. While I carried firewood, while I scrubbed floors, while I played the nurse and the wife and the invisible servant, Silas was siphoning our life into a false charity and another woman's hands. At 3 a.m, the kitchen table was littered with printed statements, screenshots, and handwritten notes. My stomach churned, but underneath the nausea was something sharp and electric: resolve. If he wanted to treat me like a free crew member, fine, but I wasn't going to swab his decks anymore. I was going to chart my own course. And the Silent Wave Fund, that was going to be the anchor that dragged him under. The next Friday night, the house filled with the familiar stink of beer and cigar smoke. Poker night. Silas's favorite stage to perform on. Normally, I'd drift around the edges like furniture, dropping off snacks, wiping spills, cleaning ashtrays, his free crew in action. But this time, I was on a mission. I slid my phone into the pocket of my parka, recording app running, microphone aimed out through a tiny tear in the fabric. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they'd hear it. "Your wife's really dedicated, Silas," one of the men said as I set a tray of chips on the table. Silas smirked. "Dedicated, please, she needs this. Without me, she's nothing. I let her feel useful." The table erupted with laughter. I excused myself to the kitchen, bile rising in my throat, but also triumph. I had it. His words, clear as day, sealed into my phone. That wasn't the only trap I set. The following week, I started keeping a journal. Every bad day, Silas performed for me versus the good days he thought I didn't see. Bad day. Can't climb the stairs, groans getting out of bed, begs me to fetch water. Good day. Walks smoothly to the fridge when he thinks I've left, lifts a case of beer like it's nothing, stretches his back without a wince. I even timed his recoveries. On poker nights, his pain magically eased enough to entertain, laugh, and slam down cards. By morning, he was back in the wheelchair, moaning about stiffness. I hid in the shadows one afternoon, watching from the shed window as he carried firewood from the porch to the stove. Alone, strong, no hesitation. But the moment he heard the door creak, he dropped a log, hunched over, and hissed through clenched teeth. "Aurelia, I need your help. The pain's too much today." That was the thing about Silas. He wasn't careless, he was arrogant, he believed no one could ever outwit him. But I had the audio, I had the notes, and soon I'd have the harbor cameras. For the first time in years, I felt something other than exhaustion or despair. I felt like a hunter, watching her prey circle closer to the trap. And Silas, he didn't even know the game had begun. The more evidence I gathered, the more dangerous Silas became. It was as if he sensed I was slipping from his grip, and he wasn't about to let me go without a fight. One Saturday afternoon, he announced casually, "June and Theo are coming over for dinner." His tone was too smooth, too rehearsed. My stomach tightened. When my children arrived, Silas was already in character. He sat hunched in his wheelchair, pale, trembling, a blanket draped dramatically across his knees. His pill bottles were lined up neatly on the counter like stage props. "I ask them here because I'm worried about your mother," he began, his voice cracking with manufactured pain. "She's been paranoid." "Paranoid?" Theo frowned. "She thinks I'm faking my injuries," Silas said, his voice dripping with hurt. "She follows me around with her phone. She says I'm hiding money, that I'm—" He stopped, lowering his head, the picture of a suffering saint. "It breaks my heart." "Mom," June's eyes searched mine, full of doubt. "Is that true?" I tried to explain. "I've seen him walk when he thinks I'm not looking. I've got recordings, logs, financial transfers. This isn't paranoia, this is proof." But the more I spoke, the more desperate I sounded. Silas leaned back, sighing heavily as if my words were knives. "You see, this is what I mean. She's creating elaborate stories." Dr. Kincaid said this might happen, caregiver syndrome. She can't accept that I'm still struggling, so she invents lies to keep herself needed. Theo shook his head slowly. "Mom, Dad looks exhausted. Maybe you're pushing him too hard." "I'm not pushing," I started, but my voice cracked. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me. Silas reached for June's hand. "I think your mother needs rest, maybe some time away, a visit to her sister in Chicago, just a little distance to clear her head." They nodded, believing every poisoned word. And in that moment, I understood the pattern. This wasn't just gaslighting anymore. This was Darvo in its purest form: deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Silas denied the abuse. He attacked my credibility. And now he painted himself as the fragile victim of an unhinged wife. And the worst part, my own children were falling for it. I excused myself to the kitchen, gripping the counter until my knuckles whitened. The rage boiled in my chest, but beneath it was something sharper, clarity. If Silas wanted a war of perception, fine. But I wasn't going to scream into the void. I was going to be smarter. I was going to let his lies dig his own grave. Because now I knew. The only way to beat a man like Silas was to play his game better than he did. That night after the so-called intervention, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying my children's doubtful eyes. Silas had turned them into witnesses for his story just as easily as he'd turned me into his servant. If I stayed silent, he'd win. If I shouted, I'd look hysterical, so I made a call I should have made years ago. "Beth," my sister's voice crackled through the line from Chicago. "Aurelia, it's past midnight in Alaska. Are you okay?" I hesitated, my throat thick. "No, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be brutally honest." I told her everything: the harbor footage, the exosuit logs, the silent wave fund, the intervention, Every detail I'd carried alone for years spilled out like a storm breaking through ice. Beth was silent for a long moment. Then she said softly, "Aurelia, I've known for a while." "What?" "Last Christmas, when you went to get groceries, Silas walked out to my car to grab my suitcase. He carried it up the stairs like it was nothing. I tried to tell you, remember? You snapped at me, said I didn't understand how much he struggled." My heart sank. She had tried. I'd been too conditioned to defend him. "There's more," Beth continued. "Theo once told me Silas drove himself to the docks while you were here in Chicago, made him promise not to say anything. I thought Theo was exaggerating. Now I see." I closed my eyes. My whole world rearranged itself in that moment. It wasn't just me who'd seen the cracks others had noticed, but I'd been too blind to believe them. "You're in an abusive cycle, Aurelia," Beth said firmly. "He's manipulating your kids, controlling your money, and making you question your own mind. That's not caregiving, that's psychological warfare." Her words felt like oxygen after years of drowning. The next morning, I took another step I'd been terrified of. I called Dr. Aria Kincaid, a therapist who specialized in emotional abuse. Sitting in her warm office with its cedar shelves and soft lighting, I felt exposed but oddly safe. "Tell me why you're here," she said. I told her. The lies, the gaslighting, the silent wave fund. How my children thought I was paranoid. How Silas threatened to send me away for rest. "Doctor," Kincaid leaned forward, her eyes steady. "Aurelia, what you're describing has a name. It's called DARVO. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. Abusers use it to make you question reality and convince others you're the problem. Everything you've said lines up with long-term psychological abuse." I broke down then, not from weakness, but from relief. Someone finally believed me. Someone named what was happening. "You're not crazy," she said gently. "You're surviving." For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. And being seen was the first step toward fighting back. Once Dr. Kincaid put words to what I'd been living, my fear started turning into something sharper: focus. If Silas wanted to play games with perception, fine. But I was done playing defense. I needed law on my side. That's how I ended up sitting in a glass-walled office overlooking the frozen harbor, across from Dahlia Crow, one of Alaska's top maritime and insurance attorneys. She had the calm, precise manner of someone who knew every trick in the book and how to dismantle them. "Show me what you've got," Dahlia said, folding her hands. I laid it all out on her desk, screenshots of silent wave fund transfers, emails with Maeve Quinn, harbor footage, the exosuit logs, my pocket recordings. The pile looked messy, desperate, but to me it was my life. Dahlia sifted through the stack, silent for several minutes. Finally, she looked up, her dark eyes sharp. "You've got strong leads, Aurelia, but here's the truth. Most of this won't hold in court. Secret recordings, inadmissible, screenshots without proper subpoenas, weak. If we come in like this, he'll spin it as paranoia and illegal spying." My stomach sank. "So I have nothing." "You have the start of a case," she corrected. "Now we build it legally." She pulled out a notepad and began listing steps, her voice steady and surgical. 1. Medical subpoenas get official rehab and insurance records. If he's been exaggerating, they'll show it. 2. Harbor surveillance obtained through proper request so it's court admissible. 3. Financial trail subpoena the Silent Wave Fund and its board. If money is being laundered or misused, it's fraud. 4. Witnesses harbor staff, his poker buddies, even Maeve if she flips under pressure. "And one more thing," Dahlia added, leaning. "We'll get you evaluated by a forensic psychologist. If Silas tries to brand you unstable, we'll have ironclad proof you're sound. You beat him by being colder, cleaner, smarter." For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just reacting, I was planning. When I left her office, the bay wind cut my cheeks raw, but I barely noticed. In my bag was a road map, one that turned my chaos into a case. Silas had treated me like a free crew member, invisible and replaceable. What he didn't know was that I was done swabbing decks. I was about to captain the ship, and his lies, they were going to sink him. Silas must have felt the tide shifting because his performance grew bolder, more theatrical. The whispers around town about his poker night bragging about me being controlling weren't enough anymore. He wanted spectacle. He wanted me destroyed in public. He chose the harbor, of course. The stage he knew best. It was a clear afternoon when I heard the call over the radio. Diver down, collapse at dock 7. By the time I got there, a small crowd had gathered, and right in the center, Silas sprawled on the boards, clutching his chest, groaning dramatically while 2 deckhands knelt beside him. "She's been pushing me too hard," he gasped, pointing a trembling hand toward me as I arrived. "She wants me dead." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few neighbors glared at me as if I'd kicked him myself. The paramedics arrived, loaded him onto a stretcher, and whisked him away. Silas made sure to squeeze every ounce of pity he could, moaning about abuse at home and being driven past his limits. But what he forgot, what his arrogance always made him forget, was that the harbor was no longer just wooden planks and salty air. It was wired with AI surveillance drones, mandated after too many insurance scams. Deputy Harbor Master Red Alvarez called me into his office the next morning. "You'll want to see this," he said grimly. On his screen, drone footage showed Silas before the collapse, walking casually down the dock with a case of beer under one arm. No limp, no wince, no wheelchair in sight. He glanced over his shoulder, then suddenly dropped the crate, clutched his chest, and collapsed in a flawless imitation of a heart attack. 2 minutes later, when the dock was momentarily empty, he sat up, opened a pill bottle, and swallowed something. He looked around, then lay back down just as voices approached. "What was in the bottle?" I asked. "OTC sleep aids," Red replied. "We dug it out of the harbor dumpster, enough to make him drowsy, not enough to kill him, classic staging." I exhaled a shaky laugh, half fury, half relief. He'd tried to frame me as an abuser in front of the entire town. Instead, he'd handed me proof of fraud on a silver platter. Red leaned forward. "Aurelia, this isn't just family drama anymore. He's staging medical emergencies for financial gain. That's insurance fraud, plain and simple." For the first time, I felt the ground tilt in my favor. Silas thought he'd humiliated me in public. Instead, he'd written his own confession in high definition. And soon, the whole world was going to watch him choke on his lies. The summons came fast. Within a week of his collapse, Silas was ordered to appear before the Alaska Maritime Insurance Board, the governing body that oversaw harbor safety claims and disability payouts. The hearing chamber was cold and formal, its tall windows looking out on a slate-gray sea. A panel of 3 officials sat at a long table. On one side, Silas in his wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, Maeve Quinn sitting just behind him with her eyes darting nervously. On the other side, me and Attorney Dahlia Crow, our evidence folder thick and heavy. Silas went first, spinning his story with the practiced cadence of a saint. "My wife has been cruel, dismissive. She pushes me beyond my limits. The stress triggered my collapse. I've given my life to this harbor, and now I'm being punished for surviving." He let his voice break on that last word, head bowed, shoulders shaking. If I didn't know better, I might have believed him. Then it was Dahlia's turn. Calm, precise, surgical. "With all due respect to Mr. North, the board deserves to see the full picture. We have legally obtained surveillance footage from Dock 7, time-stamped just minutes before the alleged collapse." She clicked a remote. The screens around the chamber flickered on. There was Silas, walking normally, crate of beer balanced on his shoulder, moving with the ease of a man decades younger. Then the collapse, the pill bottle, the staged groans. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the projector. Silas's mask slipped for the briefest moment. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed, before he forced himself back into character. That's misleading," he stammered. "Good days and bad days. Anyone with chronic pain knows the difference. But Dahlia wasn't finished." "Misleading? Then let's add context. Exhibit B, medical records subpoenaed directly from Mr. North's physical therapist. They state he achieved 85% recovery 2 years ago. Exhibit C, financial records from the Silent Wave Fund, donations funneled to personal accounts and luxury purchases. Exhibit D, testimony from harbor staff who witnessed Mr. North carrying supplies when he believed no one was watching." She laid each document on the panel's desk like cards in a final hand of poker. Maeve shifted uneasily. Her face drained of color as the panelists whispered among themselves. One of them, a stern woman with gray hair pulled into a bun, turned to Silas. "Mr. North, do you have any explanation for why your sworn testimony, your medical records, and your financial behavior all contradict each other?" Silas opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For once, the master manipulator had no script. His face tightened, his hands gripped the armrests of his chair, anger, not pain. And in that moment, everyone saw it. The board, Maeve, even my children who sat in the back row, silent and wide-eyed. The illusion cracked. Dahlia leaned toward me, her voice low but triumphant. We just took the wind out of his sails. And for the first time in years, I believed her. The board deliberated less than an hour. When they returned, their decision struck like a hammer on steel. "Mr. North," the chairwoman said, her voice steady as the sea outside, "your disability claims are suspended pending investigation. Your insurance payouts are frozen. The Silent Wave Fund is hereby placed under injunction. All accounts connected to it will be locked until further notice." The gavel cracked. Silas's face drained of color. He tried to summon his weak, frail act, but the fury in his eyes burned too hot to hide. Maeve shifted away from him, her hands twisting in her lap, as if she finally understood the iceberg she'd hitched herself to. For me, the effect was immediate. With Dahlia's guidance, I filed a petition for emergency spousal protection. Within 24 hours, I had access to half our joint assets, legally, cleanly. Enough to restart my workshop, pay my own bills, and breathe for the first time in years. I walked into our cedar house that evening, past the wheelchair parked neatly in the corner like a forgotten prop, and felt something powerful settle in my chest. Control. Not the control Silas had twisted into chains, but the kind that comes from knowing I wasn't trapped anymore. But freedom wasn't the end. It was only the start, because Silas wasn't finished. That night, as I packed a crate of tools for my workshop, I heard him on the phone in the next room. His voice was low, venomous. "She thinks she's won," he hissed. "But if she drags me down, I'll take her with me. She's paranoid, unstable, I've got proof. I'll bury her before she buries me." I froze, every muscle rigid. Proof? What proof? Then it hit me. He was laying the groundwork just like he'd done with June and Theo. The same Darvo playbook, just bigger, louder, more desperate. If he couldn't win by sympathy, he'd try by smearing me into the dirt. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe. Let him plot, let him twist. Because this time I wasn't playing servant. I was building a case, and every move he made was another nail in his own coffin. Still, as I closed my workshop door and heard the storm battering against the harbor outside, I knew this wasn't over. Silas wasn't just fighting for money now. He was fighting for survival. And desperate men are dangerous men. Silas didn't waste time. Within days of the board's ruling, the first rumors began slithering through town. At the harbor cafe, whispers floated past me like oil on water. "She's unstable, you know. Poor Silas has been suffering for years. I heard she's been recording him without consent. Creepy, right? Didn't her own kids have to stage an intervention?" His script was working. He was painting me as a paranoid, vindictive wife who couldn't handle her husband's suffering. Then the media leaks hit. A local Anchorage paper ran a story. Disabled diver exploited by wife. Charity funds frozen amid domestic turmoil. The article quoted close family sources and portrayed Silas as a tragic figure stripped of his dignity, while I, an aging artisan desperate for attention, abused him financially and emotionally. It was Darvo, writ large, splashed across headlines. June called me in tears. "Mom, Dad showed us the article. He says you're trying to ruin him. I don't know what to believe anymore." My chest ached, but Dahlia's words steadied me. "He'll escalate when he's cornered. Don't panic. Document everything. We fight fire with fact." So I braced myself. Every time a rumor surfaced, I logged it. Every anonymous leak, I traced back with Dahlia's investigator. Every article, every whisper, every neighbor's side-eye, I cataloged them like evidence pins on a board. The hardest part wasn't the lies, it was the isolation. Walking through town knowing half the people thought I was a monster. Seeing my own children wrestle with doubt. Feeling the chill of betrayal each time Silas's story gained traction. But beneath the despair was something steelier. I was done doubting my sanity, done apologizing for his cruelty. At night, in my rebuilt workshop, I ran my hands over unfinished violins, the smell of cedar and varnish grounding me. He can smear my name, but he can't erase the truth, because I had something stronger than his rumors. I had proof, and soon the court and everyone else would see it. The courtroom smelled of salt and varnished wood, the way every Alaskan harbor building does. Silas sat at his attorney's side, pale under the fluorescent lights, his wheelchair angled toward the jury like a stage spotlight. His lawyer thundered, "Ladies and gentlemen, my client is the victim. His wife has spun wild conspiracies, stalked him with illegal recordings, and drained their accounts out of spite. She is unstable, vindictive, and desperate." The jury scribbled notes. A few heads nodded. For a moment, I felt the old weight press against my chest, that suffocating sense that he would win again, that his lies would bury me alive. Then Dahlia Crow stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Let's begin with Exhibit 1, she said calmly. The screens flickered on. Drone footage from Dock 7 rolled. Silas walking easily, crate of beer balanced on his shoulder. Then his staged collapse, the pill bottle, the dramatic moans. The jury murmured. "Exhibit 2, Dahlia continued. "Medical records obtained through subpoena. Mr. North's therapist notes. 85% functional recovery, cleared for independent living, 2 years ago." Silas shifted in his chair, jaw tight. "Exhibit 3. Financial records from the so-called Silent Wave Fund. Thousands funneled into personal accounts, jewelry purchases, hotel bills, dating site subscriptions, all while Mr. North told his wife there was barely enough for groceries." Maeve Quinn was called to the stand. Under oath, her voice trembled. "He told me Aurelia was paranoid. He said he was divorced. I believed him. I helped move the money." Her eyes darted toward Silas. "But he lied to me too." The room cracked open like ice under pressure. Jurors leaned forward, pens flying across notepads. Finally, Dahlia brought the hammer down. "Exhibit 4, testimonies from Mr. North's poker buddies. Multiple witnesses confirm he boasted about playing the disability card and calling his wife his free crew." The words echoed in the chamber. Free crew, the phrase that had started it all. Silas's mask shattered. He slammed a hand on the table. "They're lying. She's poisoned them all." His voice, sharp and venomous, was nothing like the weak, trembling man he pretended to be. And in that moment, everyone saw it. The jury, the judge, even my children in the gallery, their faces pale with shock. The performance was over. Dahlia turned, gave me the faintest nod, and whispered, "The tide just turned." And she was right. For the first time, Silas wasn't the master of the story. He was the villain caught mid-act, and the whole world was finally watching. The verdict came swift as a winter tide. The judge's gavel cracked like ice splitting on the bay. "Mr. North," she said, her tone flat and final, "this court finds substantial evidence of fraud, perjury, and deliberate financial deception. Your disability benefits are terminated. Your accounts are frozen pending criminal investigation. All assets tied to the Silent Wave Fund will be seized." Silas's face twisted, rage burning through his carefully cultivated mask. He opened his mouth, but his own lawyer laid a hand on his arm, silently begging him not to make it worse. For once, Silas stayed quiet, but the damage was done. Federal fraud charges followed within days. Insurance investigators lined up interviews. The Silent Wave Fund's accounts were combed through and drained of their dirty secrets. Maeve Quinn vanished from town overnight, leaving nothing but an abandoned apartment and her testimony echoing in court records. For me, the change was subtler but far more powerful. I walked back into my workshop, dusty, silent, abandoned for half a decade. I ran my hands across the unfinished violin that had sat waiting for me all these years, and I felt something I hadn't in so long: ownership. This space, this craft, this life, it was mine again. June came first, knocking timidly at the workshop door. Her eyes were red. "Mom, I believed him. I doubted you when you needed me most. I'm so sorry." I took her hand, rough from years of her own work, and squeezed it. "He fooled all of us, June. That's what he does, but you're here now. That's what matters." Theo followed a week later, his voice tight with guilt. "I should have trusted my gut. I saw cracks, but I didn't push. I didn't want to believe Dad was lying." "You're not to blame," I told him. "You were protecting the picture of your father you wanted to be true. We all were." Together, slowly, we began to stitch something back together. Not the life Silas had dictated, but a new one, rooted in honesty, bruised but not broken. And when I stood at the harbor months later, watching investigators haul Silas's seized boat away, I didn't feel triumph or vengeance. I felt release. Like a storm had finally blown past, leaving calm water behind. For the first time in years, I wasn't a servant. I wasn't invisible. I was Aurelia Park again, artist, mother, survivor, and my story was finally mine to tell. 3 years later, the storm still came hard across Seldovia, but inside my workshop the air was warm with cedar dust and music. Rows of violins and guitars hung from the rafters, each one hand-carved, each one mine. My first gallery show in Anchorage had sold enough pieces to keep me afloat, but what mattered wasn't the money. It was the return of my voice. They called my exhibition The Silent Wave, a name I chose with a crooked smile. What once symbolized Silas's lies now stood as proof that the tide had turned in my favor. My paintings and instruments carried the scars of what I endured, dark edges, fractured shapes, but every piece bent toward light. Survivors came to my shows, whispering that they saw themselves in my work. And I didn't just create for myself. With Dahlia's help and Beth's unwavering push, I started an art therapy circle for women in the fishing towns, widows, divorcees, survivors like me. Every Tuesday evening, our little group painted storm clouds, carved driftwood, stitched nets into tapestries. What began as therapy became a community, a family born not of blood but of choice. My children came back to me fully, too. June brought her own daughter to one of my workshops, and when that girl put paint to canvas for the first time, June looked at me with tears in her eyes. Theo rebuilt the old family boat and named it the Aurelia. I laughed when I saw it, but my throat tightened all the same. As for Silas, he remained behind bars, his name a bitter footnote in court reports about fraud and manipulation. I no longer thought of him as the man who defined my life. He was a chapter, a brutal one, yes, but no longer the story. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the harbor, I caught my reflection in the workshop window. Silver hair, paint-stained fingers, eyes bright and unafraid. Not invisible, not diminished. For years I had been his free crew, unseen and unvalued. But I had charted my own course, steered my own vessel, and found harbor in myself again. And now, every time I draw a bow across strings or guide another woman's hands over a canvas, I remember. The storm didn't break me. It remade me. And I will never disappear again.